إن الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ونشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. All praise is due to Allah, Lord of the heavens and the worlds. In light of recent events, I wanted to make a khutbah on a certain thing. I have given this khutbah before, but I'd just like to reiterate some of my points because of these recent events that have happened. And if you do not know what I'm talking about, in France recently they had released a new law stating that women cannot wear the hijab until the age of 18, which is basically direct discrimination. It's not. There's no way they can work around it. It's direct discrimination against Muslims and Islam. It's Islamophobia, and that's exactly what I want to talk about in this khutbah. Once again, I know I have discussed this before, but I would like to discuss it again in light of recent events because this is a problem now, and it is coming up. So in this khutbah, I want to talk about Islamophobia. I want to talk about why it happens. I want to talk about some of its consequences, and I want to talk about some solutions towards it, or some ways we can fight it in a way. So just to repeat what I'm going to say, I want to talk about Islamophobia as in what causes it, what happens because of it, and then I want to talk about how we combat it. So without further ado, I'm going to get into my first point, which is what causes Islamophobia. So last time I told you that Islamophobia comes from the misconception, one of the biggest misconceptions, obviously, I told you last time, was that it comes from the belief that Muslims want to kill anyone who doesn't believe in their religion, and as we all know, that's not true. In fact, it's forbidden our religion to do that. However, in this case, I want to talk about another thing. I want to talk about one major belief that some non-Muslims have, people that hate Islam, they believe is that Muslims are not in a sense up to speed, up to par in today's society, and they are trying to force their way of life upon other people. They're trying to force their way of life upon other people, whether it be their own, whether it be non-Muslims, so on and so forth. So in a sense, kind of what I mentioned last time, except this time with a twist. And this is what one of the reasons why this hijab ban came to happen. It's because, they're trying to give freedom to these girls, but in reality, as we all know, it's just taking away freedom of religion. Because most Muslim girls that I know, they want to wear the hijab. The hijab is a choice. It is not a. No one can force someone to wear the hijab. And the fact that France is going out of their way to ban it shows that they're disrespecting our religion in a way, and they're taking away our freedom of religion. And because of whatever they believe, this could be a potential cause. They feel that we are trying to, that Muslims are trying to force their way of life upon others. And because of this, people, because of these are what causes these beliefs, as I should say, like these these stigmas that Muslims force their way of life upon others. But like I mentioned before, it's not true. It is completely false. There's no compulsion in religion, and everyone has the choice to believe and practice what they want. At the end of the day, we all are going to be held accountable for what we do later on. But in this life, like I mentioned, we have the choice. No one can force anybody. No one can force anything. Unfortunately, some people do not know that, and they refuse to believe the fact that Muslims, in fact, coexist with societies. And another thing that I want to mention is that they believe that, how should I say it? They believe that, in Islam, we try to oppress our women, we try to oppress other people, when that is not true. In fact, in my last khutbah, I talked about how Islam advocated for women's rights, and how as Muslims we should be fighting and striving for women's rights. And I gave historical examples as well. And it's ironic because one of the biggest examples of Islamic history and where Muslims were carrying the world scientifically. They were helping creating discoveries and whatnot. It's funny enough because these European Western countries that are trying to ban Islam and trying to crack down on Muslims were the ones that initially damaged. At first, they were damaging the world. They were the ones that were bringing these backwards ideals that plague, such as racism, sexism, etc., that are plaguing our society today. They not only that, they damaged the Muslims community. They were the ones that forced their religion upon others. And I mean, one of the biggest examples that I could give is the Spanish Inquisition. Once Muslim-owned Spain, where not just Muslims, but Christians and Jews living in Al-Andalus were given religious freedom and free to practice whatever they want. I don't remember which religion, whether it was Christian or Catholic. I gotta revise on that. But they came in and they forced everybody out who wasn't Christian or Catholic, and they oppressed everyone who wasn't as well. And it just shows where Islam was versus what these countries are trying to paint Islam to be. So these are what causes these stem of Islamophobia. Now, I want to talk about what happens because of these beliefs. Even though I've already talked about it to an extent, the biggest example I have right here is what happened in France. They're gonna come after our religion. And it's really unfortunate because while this is a major shocker, this whole hijab law that France has implemented, it's not the first thing that France has done, number one. France has, they already had tried to crack down on Muslims by banning the niqab. And not only that, but other countries across the world were banning Islamic practices or banning Islam as well. I don't remember which European country by name. I believe it was in Eastern Europe, but I'm not too sure. There's one country that doesn't recognize Islam as a religion completely. They banned Islam completely, and they do not recognize it as an official religion. They recognize it as a cult of some sort, which is very, very, very sad. And there's a major rise of Islamophobia in Europe. There's a lot of people who believe that Muslims are dangerous, evil people, as I mentioned before. But they're starting to crack down and they're removing freedom of religion. And I gave you two examples. There's actual parties in Europe that are dedicated to getting rid of Islam or trying to ban Islam from their countries in Europe. And it's not even just in Europe. In Canada, there was a law at one point that came out which tried to ban Muslim teachers from wearing the hijab, or government officials, because of some freedom of some religious legislature or whatnot. And it's very sad that this type of stuff happens, but it's happening, and we're being targeted directly. Islam is being targeted directly. Muslims and our freedoms are being targeted directly, and it's sad, but it's happening. And I could sit down and I can complain as much as I want about these, these human rights violations. I'm going to call them that because that's what they are. They're violating our freedom of religion. They're violating our rights. I could complain about these, but there has to be work done both from the Muslim community and with the help of others as well. And that's going to lead me to my third point, which is what we as Muslims can do. So I talked about the cause of Islamophobia, which are these beliefs that are spread by lies and whatnot, by these stigmas fueled by hatred, fear and whatnot. And then I talked about the negative effects, institutional discrimination, where countries are physically banning our religion, whether it be banning religious practices in certain ways, banning religious practices altogether, or banning the religion completely. This institutional discrimination is happening. It's been happening in some countries, and it is continuing to happen, as well as the fact that it's happening. Basically, is what I was trying to say. It's happening currently. So what do we as Muslims do about it? Well, for starters, we got to speak out as much as we can, because I didn't see any major media coverage about this. I learned about this through Instagram, which is really sad. I learned about it through, scrolling through some Instagram posts and seeing that. And it's really sad because this is an actual human rights violation right here. It's not a it's not a small deal, uh, and it's unfortunate that this action of banning the hijab is not getting enough media attention. So it's our duty to spread the message as much as we can. And what I would like to also mention is the fact that the other stuff that I mentioned before about, for example, Canada's law, that law in I think it was Quebec, where they tried to ban Muslim people from wearing the hijab while they're teaching or some government work, or that country that banned Islam completely. They don't recognize it as an official religion. I don't remember which country it was, but that proves my point. Is that I did not learn about this from the media. I had to learn about this through friends, as in friends would randomly bring it up and tell me this because they're into world politics. And it's sad how this sort of stuff is not getting enough traction. It's not getting enough thing. People like to claim that Muslims oppress others, but in reality, Muslims are being oppressed. It's not Muslims oppressing. It's the other way around. You know, we look at the Uyghurs in China. We look at the Rohingyas. We look at so many different groups of people who are ethnic minorities and they're Muslims and they're being oppressed. You know, some of them are being killed or concentrated. Some of them are having their rights and freedom of religions being taken away. We're seeing it so much, and we have to speak up about this. We have to work with others, and we have to try to fight for our rights because, like I said, at the end of the day, freedom of religion is a human right. Everyone has the right to believe in whatever they want, and for them to take away our freedom of religion is violating our human rights. So we as Muslims have to speak out. We have to fight against this. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So in this khutbah, I decided to reiterate a topic that I had discussed a few months ago about Islamophobia, and it is a serious problem now. It is a genuine problem that is happening, and before my khutbah before was more of a warning, although stuff that I mentioned has happened beforehand. But with this whole issue with France, France is one of the biggest countries in the Western world, and they're doing stuff like this, it kind of shows that our beliefs are in danger. Because a lot of people, we shouldn't ignore what is happening with the Uyghurs and the Rohingyas and so on and so forth. But even still, those are happening in countries so far away that it crosses the minds of many. But this is France, one of the biggest countries in the Western world. And the fact that this is happening in a country like this, it scares me, and it should be scary to all Muslims. Because if they decide to go after our rights, it's going to be very dangerous. So in this khutbah, I wanted to talk about Islamophobia. I wanted to talk about the roots of Islamophobia, which are these misconceptions and these false beliefs that Muslims are, dangerous, backwards-minded barbarians who try to enforce their ways on life upon others. These are not just my words, by the way. These are words that I hear from many right-wing, far-right activists. This is what they refer to as Muslims as. And it's very, very, very very dangerous rhetoric, and this is why. And then I talked about some of the negative aspects that happens once this Islamophobia runs freely. It goes from institutional discrimination, like with France, banning the hijab, banning the niqab, some places in Canada banning the hijab for certain positions, even sometimes countries banning Islam altogether, not recognizing Islam as an official religion, and rather as some sort of cult. And it's they're going after our human rights, and then eventually, for some countries, it even goes worse, where they torture and they kill people who are Muslims. Like I mentioned before, in in China with the Uyghurs, and I believe in Burma with the Rohingyas, and in India with the Hindutva. Even though it's technically not the government doing it, it's it's far right extremist mobs advocating this violence, and I've seen it personally. Well, I haven't seen it physically, but I've seen it, and I've seen the stuff that they do. I see the stuff that they say, and it's very dangerous, very disgusting things. And then I talked about what we should do as Muslims. What we should do is we should speak out completely, because the media is not covering this sort of stuff, which is very sad in my opinion. This is an actual human rights violation. This should be continuously being spoken of, continuously being pressed down our throats that this is happening, do something about it. So we as Muslims should speak out and spread the message as much as we can. And on top of that, we should, what I forgot to mention beforehand was we should teach people about Islam. Because one very interesting story that I heard, I do not remember the man's name. I believe his name was Jordan V something. I don't remember his last name. But he, in the previous, earlier in my khutbah, I mentioned about how some countries in Europe have these political parties just dedicated to hating Islam, kind of like how we have the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. We have other parties, but really no one pays attention to them in the United States. In countries like Europe, countries in Europe, as I should say, they have multiple political parties, not just one. They have all sorts of political parties. It's very, very, very diverse with their political parties. And some political parties in some European countries are just dedicated towards Islamophobia. Their whole center, their whole ideology, their whole motive is just against Muslims. And it's a very sad thing, obviously. I can sit down and complain about it a lot, but at the same time, it's a very dangerous thing. These people want to take away the rights of fellow Muslims in their countries, and it's disgusting. What I wanted to talk about was one of these people who was an active member in one of these parties was writing a book against Islam. He was going to publish this book completely destroying Islam, completely, taking, just bad-mouthing Muslims, bad-mouthing Islam, and his hatred was so high for Muslims. But he started to read the Quran, he read through it, he looked through it, and he fell in love with Islam, and alhamdulillah, he accepted Islam, and he left the far right, and now he's advocating for peace and love and justice, which is a very good story. So it's important that we teach people about what Islam truly is, because our religion is the most beautiful religion there is. And it is the one religion that we should follow, and it is, we should be, and the fact that people are trying to spread lies and misinformation and hatred, painting us Muslims as subhumans or barbarians and all these sort of, things, it's very, very horrible. So as Muslims, we should try to spread the truth about our religion and highlight the crises going against our people. Because like I mentioned before, so many people believe that Muslims are the ones that oppress others, but in reality, it is the Muslims that are being oppressed. And there's just so many examples right now, back in history and currently right now. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive every Muslim who has committed a sin. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help any Muslim going through any hardship. I ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to help the Muslims that are currently being oppressed by the governments, whether their rights are being taken away, such as their freedom to practice their religion, to even their lives and them being subject to torture and whatnot. Their human rights are being violated all across the globe. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I ask you to help those Muslims in need. Allah, I ask you to help these vaccines get administered as quickly as possible to those in need, so that everyone can be safe and free from the virus. I ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to help restore our normal lives and bring our masajids back together. We're very close to that. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have for us to have a very blessed Ramadan. Ramadan is just a few days away. I hope that fasting goes easy for everyone, and especially during these trying times. The month of Ramadan is able to be celebrated and goes well for everyone. لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر.